Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Dr. Hollowed, your favorite channel for all things spooky and paranormal. I'm John, and I hope you're having a great day filled with excitement and curiosity. In today's topic, we'll be exploring the creepiest, most unexplainable, and most paranormal things that people have witnessed in broad daylight. From ghostly apparitions to strange creatures lurking in the shadows. So sit back, relax, and get ready to be spooked. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you enjoy the video and want to see more of our chilling content. For today's background, we'll be playing a game called Raid: Shadow Legends, which is also a sponsor of this video. It's a mobile RPG game that's taken the gaming world by storm with its stunning graphics and dynamic gameplay. It's no wonder that millions of players worldwide have fallen in love with this game. Raid: Shadow Legends is hosting an egg hunt in April, where players can find the egg and win in-game rewards and real-life prizes worth $20,000, including legendary Raid champions and Amazon gift card. This event is for new players, but existing Raid players can join in on the excellent fun as well. Just go to egghunt.plarium.com to receive a special promo code that all players can use to receive a small gift in-game. But wait, there's more. The 4th anniversary of Raid just happened last month. Imagine hosting a dinner party with 4 of your favorite Raid champions. Who would you invite to your dinner party and why? Get creative and imaginative with your choices and win exclusive in-game rewards. I already have my top picks for dinner guests. First up is Raglan, who's the most exceptional reviver in Raid. Her healing abilities are unmatched, and she could come in handy if anyone at the dinner table falls ill or needs immediate medical attention. Then we have Venus, the offensive support champion, who's incredibly versatile and could keep the conversation engaging with her knowledge on a variety of topics. Kalia, on the other hand, is a formidable offensive champion with a burning passion for dealing massive damage. She could share stories about overcoming challenges and pushing herself to achieve greatness. Last but not least is Mithrala Lifebane, a highly versatile champion that originates from the Hydra. She could share captivating stories of her battles and offer strategic insights into the world of raiding. So, to sweeten the deal, you'll get insane bonuses, including an epic champion, Knight Errant, from the Bannerlords faction, energy refills, a skill tome, and an XP booster, just for using our link in the description or scanning our QR code. So come join us on the battlefield, and let's have some fun.
Not my story and definitely not seen. One of my classmates was at my house and we were telling each other creepy encounters we've had in the past. My classmate has a lot of these stories and she thinks it's more like her mind is playing games with her than paranormal. She was alone in her apartment that day because her parents went out on a date. However, at some point, her parents got separated and were trying to find each other. Her mom called her about it, saying her dad was missing and said that she was going to try to contact him. As soon as she put the phone down, my classmate heard her dad's phone ringing from the kitchen. She was in the living room, several times. She chuckled, knowing that her mom might never find her dad by trying to call him and asking him where he is. A few minutes later, her dad called her and announced that he has found his wife. Classmate just said okay. She didn't realize until later that what she heard was possibly a haunted phone. St. Augustine, Florida's lighthouse is fucking nuts. When I was about 14 to 15, my family went to Florida for vacation, but we didn't want anything to do with Orlando. Been there, done that sort of thing. We stayed around St. Augustine and heard about it being haunted. So I begged and begged to go and we went. So at the lighthouse, that I can remember, there's a main tourist building full of historical items and stuff in the lighthouse. Within the museum, there is a seating section and a short documentary being shown. I was the only person sitting and watching. After about 3 minutes of watching, something tapped my shoulder. I turned around and I'm still the only one there with no one around me. Right when I stood up, I saw my family leave for the lighthouse. So thanks Ghost for alerting me to that. When I was 12, I would walk home from school every day in a relatively safe small town in Virginia. One afternoon I just happened to notice 2 men in a truck driving by and staring at me. It was broad daylight, probably 3 or 3:30 p.m., whenever school let out, and I was on our main street which, while not a busy road, was at least relatively populated by passing cars. Hardly isolated. The truck passed with their looming glances and I immediately clocked it as odd, but that quickly upgraded to scary when these two guys came around from behind me driving down the same street again. They kept their eyes on me and I marched on. They turned up ahead and it happened again. By now I'm freaking out, thoughts of an impending abduction are racing and my adrenaline is spiking. I see them turn down the road again. I can't accurately remember how many times they've done it, but I think in my head it feels like more than it probably really was, like I was starting to imagine this was the 5th or 6th time now in my panic. As soon as I'm out of their line of sight I turn around and run as fast as I can the other way. Before all this began I had just passed my aunt's apartment. She lived a little off the beaten path in a converted house with a business in the front/living space in the back. I am an idiot for not just running into literally any storefront nearby instead of ducking into what I can't call an alley but a space between buildings and out of the public eye, for sure. Dumb. My aunt wasn't home but I knew where she kept a spare key so I snagged that, opened the lock frantically and sprinted inside. I watched out the side window and saw the truck pass by at least one more time. I raided her freezer and heated up a steak while continuing to check for my returning would-be kidnappers and then eventually deciding the coast was clear and I could go home. Now, I don't know. This whole situation could have been and in fact probably was a complete misunderstanding. We were a small enough town that I never heard any reports of kids going missing like I'd expect if there were active kidnappers in the area. Nobody just mysteriously stopped showing up at school or anything. And if they were kidnappers, why the hell would they pick me, a fat, tall for my age, male middle schooler who could put up a just enough fight to cause a scene, and during the middle of the day with so many potential witnesses? It just wouldn't make much sense. Still though, they were looking at me. That's clear enough. They rounded that street in their beat-up truck some number of times and looked at me each trip. Maybe they just thought I looked like someone they knew. Maybe they were just fucking with me. Who knows? But it didn't feel good. I, probably like many of you, have stories on stories of the spooky Wookiee things that happened, but this story just happened today, August 13th, 2018 around 3:05ish p.m. I recently just moved from Arizona to Chicago. Mostly all my happenings happened in Arizona. From always feeling watched, not in a paranoid sense but in an animal waiting to be tackled sense, you know the difference. Attempting to astral project I was a dumb 15-year-old, and ended up being followed/threatened home, all the way to alien/ghost? It's really a toss-up since I don't talk to other people about this. Anyway, once I moved to Chicago things were so peaceful. Till today. I am off work today, so what's a girl to do but eat, play, and sleep all day? I took my nap around 3 p.m. before my roommates came back home. Being in and out of sleep because people are blowing my phone with text messages, but at some point it stops and I actually doze, till they come. In that state of being half and half awake and sleep, I hear my family's pet name for me being called out from the hallway. I am ready to yell out what? As all loving daughters do when disturbed from slumber, only to remember that I don't live with family anymore. My brain takes that moment to remind me that they found me and at the same time, wait, what, who? My mind is suddenly hit with familiarity, overwhelming fear, guilt, and acceptance. It's an odd mix, but it is what it is. I'm no expert, but now that I have time to think about it, I guess this is what an abused person feels like. I have this sense that this presence is/are two individuals. One a female, the other a male, but keep in mind I can't and won't see them, I can only feel them. I keep my eyes closed in hopes that they won't be too mean if they think I'm asleep. Like really, where did that thought come from? Have I done this before? They get into bed with me, one cuddling my front, the other spooning me. They start to rub my right shoulder and right knee, waiting for a reaction. I decide to still pretend to sleep but smile and cuddle right back. Again, why did I decide to do that? I was so afraid of being punished. Then bam, I really went to sleep, but it felt forced. I did dream, but it was horrible. They were there but not really there, as in I could only really get a sense that they were around. For sure now they had genders and seemed to be around my age. Again, not sure how I knew, just felt that way. We were still in my room, but I was now pushed up against the wall atop my bed and being FK'd. It honestly felt like I was being taught a lesson, all the while the female counterpart was checking my temperature. Apparently I was a healthy 140 degrees. When they were both done doing their own whatever you want to call it to me, I was allowed to move around my room, but there was a lingering threat of never being able to escape them. I woke up eventually feeling like a horrible person and saw that it was 5:45ish. Now, there is that old animal sense of being watched, followed, etc. After being in Chicago for a month and having a quiet life, the sense of not being alone is very apparent and disturbing, because if this how I felt as a child but just grew used to it, this raises so many questions. Also, this is just my most current situation. My life in Arizona was filled with other weird stuff. This is just really messing with my feelings right now. Truthfully, this wasn't in the middle of the day. But it was right outside my aunt's home and my friend and I both saw it. It wasn't too late. Maybe 6 or 7 p.m. in the summertime. My friend and I were playing in my aunt's backyard when we saw a plane flying above us. We watched it because it was unusually close. Like to the point where you think it's about to land in the backyard. So we watched it flying above us, when it completely stopped right above my aunt's backyard and stood completely still for a good 5 minutes, at least. My friend and I were young at the time so we watched it, but we were also really scared and ran inside to tell our parents, but of course they didn't believe us and refused to come outside. When she and I went outside again, it was gone. I don't know if that's normal for planes or not. First to come to mind is the most recent, though I'm sure I'll think of more later. So I work with infants at a daycare. My classroom had a wall with about 5 big windows going from one end to the other. Outside these windows was a small, fenced-in grassy area with a gate leading to the front playground and one leading to the back playground. Now, these fences are huge, privacy fences, and the gates are too. Probably not impossible to climb if you were determined enough, but you wouldn't be able to do it quickly. I was in my room, alone, one day early last year. It was almost, sort of spring, but winter still had a tight grip on us, so probably March or so. Anyway, I was rocking a baby and doing a training on my tablet when a movement caught my eye. I saw a man, 5 feet 8 inches in height, wearing an orange jacket, looking into my classroom from the windows. I was just about to jump up and alert someone when he moves out of view of the window and the assistant director walks into my room to have me sign papers or something. I told her what I saw and she headed out to check. Found no one. Everyone else at my work has their own ghost story and most deal with a tall man and or the color orange. Had a massively deep voice yelling for me to come into the closet when I was younger. Everyone was on the other side of the house and I was near my bed, which is also near the door, so no one could have snuck up on me. I also lived in Newark and often had to keep eyes on the back of my head because ignorance was prevalent. Anywho, some deep ass voice screamed, "Town 'bout come in the closet." And I know for a fact I wasn't gonna be in the news disappearing. I sprinted out that fucking door so fast, damn near slid outside the house how fast I was running, and fell to the floor trying to run into the room where my father and grandma were. It couldn't have been them because my dad has a very high pitched voice and he, no matter how angry he's gotten, never hit a pitch that fucking deep. And I know my grandmother couldn't have hit that. She wouldn't lay a hand on me if it meant ending world hunger. Me and my friend went camping, and while the tent was being packed up we went for a walk and came to a walkway above the site. There were a few steps as the path was elevated, so we went up and seen that on our side, apart from the thin steps, was all the caravans and tents, on the other was a big drop to water. We then see in the distance that a horse was coming along the path towards our direction, and as it couldn't turn around, we went back and waited on those little steps. After a while, we walked to the top to see how far the horse was, as it had not gone past us yet, and it had gone. Doesn't sound so frightening, but there is literally no explanation as to where it went for us to be unable to see it. Couldn't turn around and nowhere to go either side. The only way was past us, and it didn't. Where did it go? Late to the party, per usual. I was about 10 years old and my dad was gone out of town for something. This was pretty unusual. My mom let me sleep in her bed and we stayed up very late looking at old photos and her telling me a lot about her childhood. It was pretty special time for me, and my mother was not given to share a lot about how she grew up, because it was pretty painful. She had it rough, and her mom had died when she was just 3 weeks old from peritonitis due to childbirth complications. Her dad hired a nanny who became her stepmom, and she was pretty awful, from all accounts. Mama was born in 1927 at home on a little ranch way out in the country near the NM/TX border. Apparently the dying process for her mom, Grandma Hallie, was pretty brutal. Mama's older sisters were 9 and 12, and her brother was 14, so my mom was a little bit of a surprise and late in life baby. Right after Hallie died, everyone was in the next room, Doctor, Papa and her siblings, holding my mom. They all very clearly heard Hallie speak, "Don't worry, I'm safe in the lifeboat." Keep in mind she had already been pronounced by the doctor. They were all super freaked out, but took comfort in it as it was words from a favorite hymn of hers. I heard this story all my life after my mom died, from both my aunts and from the doctor. Back to Tenyo Me. Mama had talked about how much she wished she'd known her mother. Her stepmom was controlling and pretty mean. The photos we had of Hallie showed her hair to be long waist length and auburn. My mom's hair was very short and gray. I was a blonde with shoulder length hair. The next morning when we woke up and went into the kitchen, Hallie's silver brush was on the kitchen table, along with a single long, 20 inches or so, auburn hair. The brush was kept in a trunk in my mom's room and we hadn't opened it in months. No one in our house had red or auburn hair. Our house is haunted, we think. There have been a few strange occurrences in the 18 months I have lived here. The vacuum turned itself on the other week while my housemate was feeding the dogs. He heard the pedal click. The dogs were both in front of him. Personally, my weirdest ones were when my phone, which has rubber plugs to stop it sliding, and was placed on a gloss-painted surface. The phone just magically moved from one side to the other, shifting things along the way. Just couldn't keep my eyes off it. Checked the phone to make sure it wasn't on vibrate or something, but it makes no audible noise except when it nudged my keys, at which point it stopped moving. The other, which may or may not be anything to do with haunting, was when in the middle of the night I went to the bathroom and the toilet was covered in liquid shit. I mean, spilled over the edge onto the outside of the bowl and everything. So the reason for the maybe is that I was living with an ex who was having her monthly visit. There was some red in the bowl, so I assumed she was having a bad time and manned the fuck up on that situation, but she was adamant it was me who had done it, most likely due to embarrassment, but who knows? Shitting poltergeist maybe, ha 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 ha? Looked like something out of a horror movie for sure. Burned the rug in the end. Didn't want to ever remember that night. I am working in a Catholic school near our house for a few years now. I've heard stories about spirits and possessions that happened in the school before I started working there. I was really not that afraid since I haven't experienced any kind of that thing until me and my office mates were eating our snacks at the pantry and we were talking about the program in the school that day. We were laughing so hard until I heard an indistinct voice down under that laughed with us. It was a squeaky voice. I cannot identify if it is from a male or a female. We were all female in the office BTW. I looked at my other office mate whom I found also looking at me with a surprised face. She heard it too. We swear it was a tiny voice that came near the floor. From that day, I couldn't help but think of the other experiences I previously had that I ignored, like the time I saw a little image of a child walking on my peripheral view and saw nobody was there. Recently, we were having our lunch break and we were resting when all of a sudden we heard a loud noise from the second floor, testing room, like something hit the floor. The eraser of the whiteboard simultaneously fell with the sound. We were all shocked since there is nobody on the second floor that time. As a kid, I was sleeping in my room one night upstairs when I woke up to this loud clanking/banging sound. I was completely terrified and spent the majority of the night cowering and shaking in my bed. Eventually I mustered up the courage to go see what was causing this sound. As I walked downstairs, the noise got louder and I could actually see what it was. Our stairway started in a foyer and went upstairs, but the foyer had a hallway with these weird white doors that could shut, almost like shutters, and separate the living room from the foyer. These doors had been slamming on their own until I came downstairs. As I had started going downstairs, they stopped, it seemed. I checked the windows thinking we had left them open as we often had. Not a single window was open and there was no actual breeze going through the house. Scariest thing I had ever experienced. I used to live in a house that was always pretty creepy. Banging sound every night at 3 a.m., random footsteps and so on. Anyways, in the dining room we had 3 framed paintings we bought from a thrift store that were placed vertically in a row. It was around lunchtime and my family was all sitting around the dining room table when we noticed both our cat and dog fixated on the area of the paintings, so we all looked over at the paintings trying to figure out what they were so fixated on, when suddenly the painting placed in the middle of the rose glass exploded out of the frame, shattering everywhere. None of us could figure out what caused the glass to explode out of the center one. It's possible it was just under pressure, but given the pets being fixated on it and other creepy things that have happened in that house, it freaked us all out. About 7 years ago there was a show that a very popular band was playing that all my friends were going to see. I took too long to buy tickets so I wasn't going, but I wanted to say hi to my friends since so many people were going to be there. This particular venue is a very popular punk venue and in a sketchy part of town. Unfortunately, lots of addiction, homelessness, and violence, so you gotta be on your toes a bit. My boyfriend at the time and I were at the beach earlier and decided to walk over since it was a nice day. We're crossing an intersection about 2 blocks away from the venue at the same time a man with a long trench coat. Keep in mind it's also mid-August, so that would have been hot as hell. I didn't think anything of it because I figured perhaps he was homeless and just needed clothing of some kind, no big. So we cross, and as he just passed us I heard a loud clattering sound behind me. I reflexively turn around to help the man pick up whatever he had dropped. What I didn't know was that he had dropped a pretty big meat cleaver. Before I could say or do anything, the man grabs the cleaver, tucks it in his coat and bolts away into an alleyway. Never heard anything on the news about somebody getting cleaved, so that's good. But fucking hell, that was unnerving. First, when I started my new job, HR needed an actual SS card and not just the number. So I went to the local SS card issuing office to get a reissue. I drew my number to wait. I was walking towards an open seat. Out the corner of my eye I see a younger looking man, probably 18 or so. Once I got a good look at him, it took me a second to realize this kid looked just like me when I was 18. Similar hair, similar style of clothing, and similar size. What was interesting was that, he had some of the features that I have presently now, as in he had an extremely similar tattoo in the same location that I had and even the same piercings in the same location as me. The thing is, I didn't get the tattoo and piercings till I was in my 20s. The creepy part was that he didn't say hi or how are you? Like you would say to a stranger you're greeting. Instead, he said hey, it's good to see you again. As if we knew each other. I was stunned and was only able to get out a hey how's it going? Then he got up and walked past me, and when I went to turn around, and wasn't there. I still think about that moment at times. If there was a person and place to be to get my identity stolen, it would have been with him at the Social Security office. The second. My name is John, this ties in later. Back when I was like 15 or so, I was in a small district of Zhoushan, which is in Kaohsiung, Taiwan, but a bit more run down. I was just walking around the streets listening to a podcast or audiobook I think, looking at the ground. I knew the area enough to not walk into the middle of the street. I decided to turn down into an empty, dead-end alley. Still looking at the ground, and listening to the story on the podcast but not really focusing on it, I hear loudly, from what seems like my earbuds, John, look up. Instinctively I did, because my name is John. So I stopped and looked up. In front of me, like 4 inches from my face, is a skinny piece of rebar right at my eye level. There was no one around me to warn me of that, nor would they have said it in English. Felt like some higher being was looking out for me that day. My dad and I were eating a 4 p.m. meal, watching some of that good old South Park. It was a clear day out for hundreds of miles around us. We lived in the hills, as well. Our living room is insulated heavily, to keep warmth and coolness in the respective seasons. The insulation doesn't conduct electricity. Our windows are on the far wall from where we're sitting. So we're eating, and all of a sudden, this white flash lights up the room. I couldn't even see the TV, it was so bright. And with it, something that looked like a tiny bolt of lighting flew across the room, from one wall, all the way into the hallway. No idea where it arced to. But it remained there for about half a second, twisting and turning, before disappearing. My dad and I looked at each other and both said what the fuck? There were no scorch marks where it had come from through the wall. And none where it had left the wall. To this day, I am still afraid of death via inexplicable indoor lighting bolts. When my mom met my stepdad, we moved to Kentucky. I was around 6 at the time, and lived there for about 8 years. Stuff happened constantly at that house. My stepdad's first wife had died from cancer only 6 or so months before then. All of these happened during the day. Several times I remember seeing my mom walk down the hall, and when I followed her she wasn't there, instead being on the other side of the house. Knocking and footsteps were common. A glass cabinet's door decided to swing open and fall off, as everyone in the house was sitting at the dinner table. A vase sitting on top of our kitchen cabinet flipped over the 4 to 5 inch ledge, fell 7-ish feet, and landed perfectly upside down on its skinny mouth without cracking. My stepdad had throat cancer from secondhand smoke and had most of his vocal cords removed. When his sister came to visit, she insisted on smoking. When she used the very thick crystal ashtray, it split perfectly in half, and one half shot across the room. One that affected me the most was when my brother and I were reading on the same couch. I suddenly felt like I had to move to the other couch, or at least off of this one. Just as I was about to tell my brother this, he suggested the same thing. After we moved and got settled, the light bulb in the lamp next to the now empty couch exploded, coating it with little bits of glass. Everyone experienced stuff in that house. So much so that my non-religious mother and hard atheist stepdad sat together in an empty room and tried to explain to the spirit that this is the way it is now, and that my mom doesn't mean any harm, and loves my stepbrother. Was working on something in our bedroom. My chihuahua was laying on the bed, and as I was going into the closet I saw a dark, cat-shaped shadow-looking thing run in there. I yelled at our cat to get out of the closet because he shouldn't be in there, and turned to look at the dog because she usually would have chased him out. She was still laying on the bed, looking very confused, and I followed her gaze to my desk and noticed that the cat was sitting under it. The way this happened, there was not enough time for the cat to run into and back out of the closet, and whatever ran and never came back out. I quickly grabbed my pup and told my BF that I refused to go back in there until he checked it. He found nothing. Later on, his sister casually informed me that their deceased gray cat likes to haunt the house. Not my story but my father's. My dad is a part of a major university's police department where I live, and it is an inner-city campus. One day in the early evening he got a call for him and his partner to go check out an old building which the university had recently purchased from the city. This needs to be done from time to time to prevent people from squatting. Anyhow, when him and his partner arrived, they rolled up on the most stereotypical creepy looking brick building with the windows boarded up and everything. Once they got inside, they split up so one could take the lower levels and my dad took the upper ones. This is where things get weird. Once my dad got to the upper levels, he heard some noise coming from the end of a hallway and went to go check it out. Once he was about to round the corner, a big black dog just came bounding over and bolted down the hallway into a room that it dead-ended at. After running to the end of the hallway and getting into the room, the dog was nowhere to be found. There was no other way out of the room. Dad is puzzled, but decides to just finish his job and keep clearing rooms. After a little while, he distinctly hears a toilet flush and rusty metal noises. This building doesn't have running water. So as one might imagine, he quickly finished clearing rooms and noped right on out of that building. Strangest part is when they both got back to the cruiser, he asked his partner if he heard any of it and he said no. Just last summer, while I was in OCS at Fort Benning, doing squad lanes, basically, lead a squad through a mini firefight, see how you lead and grade your performance, as a saw gunner, because hey, it's a simple job that needs someone relatively strong, and dumb but strong is my exact skill set. Anyway, we're moving through this shitty swamp, getting soaking ass wet because the guy whose turn it was to lead the squad was having a hard time figuring out where we were, when we stumble upon some old wooden buildings with C-wire and rusted 5.56, I assume, link everywhere. Turns out that there's tons of old, abandoned training areas in the Fort Benning everywhere, some even going back to before World War II, and I remember being more than a little creeped out by the sheer feeling of abandonment I got from the place. The fact that it looked like the place had been abandoned in a hurry, again, lots of abandoned MG Link, along with a bunch of other weird shit that didn't seem like you would normally leave behind, made me feel like I was in a schlicky horror flick. I used to nanny for a 2-year-old boy and the gig was pretty easy. Most of the time I was there, he would sleep for an hour and a half. When he'd wake up, I would just make him a little lunch and we would play around until his parents got home. So one day while he was napping, it was just another normal day during the fall in Ann Arbor, I was doing my homework as I usually do while he naps. Out of nowhere I hear a noise come from the kitchen, but before I continue, let me tell you the layout of the house. So the kitchen is just your normal one with a sliding door leading out to the backyard, and the living room was enclosed, but there was a couch next to a wall that was sort of a hallway from the living room to the kitchen with the basement door included in that hallway. Okay, back to the story. So I hear this noise coming from the kitchen, wee woo, which was obviously a police/fire truck sound, whatever. Keep in mind I can't see the kitchen because I am sitting on the couch and there's a wall that blocks my view. As soon as I hear the noise, I see a little toy car come rolling up into the view from out behind the wall. As you can imagine, my first reaction was WTF just happened. I absolutely love watching scary movies and my first instinct was do not go investigate, but being the curious and paranormal obsessed person I am, I go and look anyway, ha 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 ha. When I looked, nothing was there, and so I went to check on the boy and he was asleep. I brush it off and put the car back into the kitchen. I was a little spooked, so I decided to turn on the TV and take a break from homework, and about 15 to 20 minutes later, after I had forgotten about the whole thing, I hear wee woo, and there it is. Coming back into my view was that damn toy car. Let me tell you, when I say I freaked out, I freaked out. I ran upstairs and woke the boy up and went out into the backyard and did not go back into that house until his parents came home. I had never experienced anything paranormal before, but this was definitely something I could not explain. This one is only a few days old. I share a flat with a girl that is currently on vacation, so I've been home alone for almost 3 weeks now, but a few days ago I was lying on my bed trying to take a nap and I swear to Jesus I heard a woman sneeze. It sounded like she was right next to my bedroom door, and the door was open. I froze and stared at the corridor for a few seconds trying to find an explanation, but I couldn't come up with one. So just to double check, I got up, headed to my flatmate's room and knocked. No answer, so I decided to open the door, and of course the room was empty. I went back to my room and closed the door, a bit scared and confused, but I decided it was best to think that maybe as I was falling asleep I hallucinated the sneeze. A few minutes later I heard a bang coming from either the kitchen or the living room. And this time I was not in the process of falling asleep. This happened during daylight, because if it had happened during the night I would have just dropped dead scared shitless. I still don't know where the sneeze came from. Bear in mind, I do not live in an apartment. It's like a villa, so we don't have neighbors. Another thing. Last night as I arrived to work, night shift, I stepped out of the elevator and this time I heard a man cough. Thing is, there was no one at the corridor. Just me. At 11 p.m. I was at my grandparents' house in Pink Knoll Shores, Outer Banks. I was just a kid, probably like 12 or something. Anyway, I'm looking out a window and I see a large black animal laying on the front yard of the neighbor's house across the street. I thought it could just be a black dog, but I saw a long tail that looked feline. I ran into the kitchen where my parents were and told them there was an animal in the neighbor's yard, but when we went back to the window it was gone. Of course, when I told them I thought it was a black panther, they thought I was crazy. To this day I still don't know what I saw. For a while I thought it could have just been a black dog, but it looked larger than a black lab and that tail looked nothing like a dog's. Weirdest part is there are a ton of reports and stories online that claim to have seen various big cats in North and South Carolina. Also, it's weird because Pine Knoll Shores is one big island. The only way to get there is by bridge. There are only 2 bridges on the whole island to get to the mainland, and they are both very big and long with tons of cars on them. I still wonder if my eyes were playing tricks on me or what, but I still wonder if I really did see a black panther that day. Earlier today, I went on a hike with my brother on a public trail near our house. We were walking back home in the beating sun, when I saw someone in the grove of trees next to the path. I could only make out a figure with a black brim hat and an orange shirt. He was crouching in the bushes against the trees, so I wasn't able to see from his upper torso down. I also couldn't make out any features besides the brim of the hat and the orange shirt. I don't remember what their face looked like, what color skin they had, what hair they had. All I could see was the black hat and orange shirt. I stopped for just a second and stared at the figure in the bushes, and they kind of crouched lower behind the bush so I couldn't see the hat or orange shirt. I thought maybe it could have been someone taking a wilderness dump, but they were about 10 to 15 feet off the path, and it isn't even like sparse wilderness. It's about a 10-minute walk and then you start to see houses. I don't think it was a homeless person, and I know this sounds a little rude, but the orange shirt wasn't dirty at all. From what I'd seen from it, it looked fresh out of the wash. Even so, I just got a bad gut feeling and decided to keep moving. It could have been an entirely innocent person popping a squat in some foliage, but I just wanted to go home immediately after. It was really freaky. During high school I worked at PetSmart as an animal care associate. We had a wall of 116 fish tanks. Behind them was a room/hallway that ran the length of the tanks where you could access the filter system and food/supplies for all the animals in the store. The supplies were kept in Rubbermaid bins stacked up on shelves. During a shift I was talking with a coworker when we hear this enormous crash behind the fish tanks. It sounded as if a bin of supplies had fallen from the top shelf or been thrown down the hallway. We run back behind the tanks and nothing is out of place. Not a single thing had fallen. We never found an explanation. Through the years I worked there, smaller weird things would happen too. I'd constantly hear cat/dog food cans being smashed to the ground but never find anything amiss. Fish would swap tanks, moving clear to the other side of the line, and up or down rows. The fish would move between me closing the store at night and reopening in the morning, so it couldn't have been a customer moving them. I worked part-time at an internet gaming center back in the early 2000s, when broadband didn't have the market share it has now. The place was in the basement of a building on the square of a smallish southern college town. There had been a Civil War battle just outside of town, and the building dated to prior to the war. Everybody that worked there had some experiences at some point. Spooky, but not threatening. Most of them were at night. On Friday/Saturday we didn't close until after midnight, so much of the open hours were after sunset. I did have an experience that was definitely during the day, though. We opened on Sundays at around 1 p.m. I opened up that day, was there by myself. Turned on the first batch of PCs, the place was empty for a while before any customers came in. They came and stayed for an hour or so and left. It was probably 4 p.m, it had been empty for a while. It was a slow day for business. I had been looking for stuff to do and sat down to check my email. I heard a loud, bored sigh to my left, where a customer would stand at the front desk. I turned to apologize for not hearing them come in, and there was no one there. I've had a few strange experiences happen in broad daylight when I lived in LA. Once was in the middle of the day. I was working retail in a somewhat creative display capacity, and I was outside on the back stoop of the store, which was in a pretty old building in the old part of downtown Pasadena. The stoop faces a large parking lot and people often try to enter from the back of the store, and employees would redirect them to walk around the front. I was outside because I had been painting something when a strange man who looked like he was in his late 40s came to sit right next to me, dressed in old ragged denim overalls, black boots and a button-up maybe plaid shirt, despite the heat. He sat right next to me, but I didn't want to be rude and I didn't think much of it because there was a bench under a tree nearby where all of the employees from surrounding businesses would come on their smoke breaks, and I figured he was taking a break. It was broad daylight and he seemed harmless, and I hated my job and all of the people I worked with anyway, so I thought, fuck it, and spoke to him for a few minutes. I don't remember most of what was said, but he spoke in a strange way, I remember that much. I assumed he was a transient as there are so many in LA. I do remember that he said that I resembled a movie star I had never heard of, and I took mental note of her name. I've since forgotten. A minute or so later, just after he said something else to me, I look down in the thing I am painting, look up, and he is nowhere to be found. I stand up, walk around a few feet looking for him, and people are starting to notice me looking, but I don't see him. I shrug it off, go back inside, work on something else, take a break and Google the movie star, and an old black and white photo pops up. It's an actress from the 40-50s maybe. I remember thinking I didn't look anything like her. It's at this point that I start to think that maybe I've seen a ghost. I don't believe in ghosts nowadays, but I did back when this happened, so it freaked me out quite a bit. I woke up earlier than usual one morning with the intention of trying to skive off school. I thought being up early made it more convincing, as I could say I had to rush to the bathroom to be sick. Nobody else in the house was awake, but as I was sitting there on the stairway to my attic bedroom waiting for the right moment to pull my too ill to go to school routine, I clearly heard a voice say my name. It was a man's voice and a bit inquisitive, like the tone was asking me if I was okay. I jumped right up and tried to find the source of the voice. It wasn't my dad. He snores like somebody dragging a saw blade across metal railings, so I could tell he was asleep. The only other male voice could have been my brother. His bedroom door was ajar and he was fast asleep too. I waited to see if he was pulling a prank for some reason, but he was definitely asleep. Besides, it didn't sound like his voice at all. It sounded like my grandfather, who had died years before. I felt like my lie about being ill was exposed before I even had the chance to commit the wicked crime and hurried off back to bed. That house was pretty creepy anyway, to be honest. It wasn't the only strange experience I had there, although it was the most vivid. In the attic bedroom I once saw what I can best describe as a ball of light saunter across the floor at cat height. This happened on the day my cat died. What was particularly unsettling was that my other cat watched the light too. He didn't seem frightened, but he watched it just slightly hesitantly, precisely like he would if the other, bigger cat had just walked across the room. I came home recently to a book on the floor that couldn't have possibly fallen off of the shelf by itself. I recently ran out of space on the shelving unit, so my books are so tightly fitted it takes a bit of force to pull one out. I asked my boyfriend if for any weird reason he had moved it, and he responded as puzzled as I was that he hadn't. I put it back and didn't think of it again until a couple weeks later. We were watching TV in the living room when there was a bang noise from the kitchen. We both turned around and paused the TV but couldn't find what the noise could have came from. Keep in mind that bookshelf is in our dining room between the kitchen and living room. Another 5 minutes goes by when we hear another bang. So we pause the TV again and turn around, but this time a photo album that was so tightly fitted and pushed at least 2 inches from the edge of the shelf was laying on the floor. I normally don't buy into paranormal shit, but my fraternity house in college was seriously haunted. The start of the stories goes back to the mid-80s when Q guy living in the house at the time, his name was Dwayne, there's even OD'd on coke in his bed on the second floor. I was in there 30 years after that all went down, but there were stories every year about weird shit happening in the middle of the day. I never really read too much into any of the stories until I was living there over the summer when not many people were there, down to around 9 instead of the typical 30. One day I walked into the basement where the kitchen was, and on the wall by the boiler room I saw the shadow of someone move across the wall and then saw the door to the boiler room close. Since there were only a few of us there over the summer, I wanted to check and see who was home and walked into the boiler room. Not only had the light been off in there, meaning it would have been impossible to cast a shadow on the wall next to the door, but I thoroughly looked through there and there wasn't anyone to be found. It kinda creeped me out a little and made me start believing. There were other little things like the automatic paper towel dispensers going off on their own, but the only other super creepy thing was every single person that ever slept in the room where Dwayne died developed sleep paralysis within a week of living/sleeping in the room. This happened at night, but these stories are getting me through a boring workday and I want to contribute/get opinions. I'm 28 now, but I was always a drummer and in bands since 13. I kept my drums at my bassist's house, and he had a very old cottage-type house with an unfinished basement that literally represented that of a castle or dungeon. Holes in the walls, moss, dust, always freezing. Anyway, unlike any other Saturday night after our bandmates left, I would take 3 of the couch cushions from the living room, plop them on his floor and fall asleep with headphones in. I couldn't fall asleep because his house always creeped me out. He was snoring, and I rolled over to see a shadowy figure kneeling right over me as if to look directly at me. I panicked and immediately rolled onto my opposing side, clenching my eyelids shut. I rolled back over and the figure had gone. The next morning I told my buddy, I think your sister came in to say hi or see who was here in the middle of the night. He laughed and said that she had been on a trip to Africa and wouldn't be home for another week. No one else was home. Over 10 years later, I still think about it. Only time anything like this has ever happened to me. I have a few stories, but most happen at night, so I'll stick to the ones I lived during the day. My first creepy/odd/unexplained story happened when I was around 8. My dog, who had been in the family before my birth and saw me grow up, was old and sick. My parents had told me they'd take her to the vet, but since I was so small and quite sheltered by them, they framed it so I had hoped she'd just be healed. I went to school and, a little before recess, I felt like I'd just been sucker punched and started bawling, and didn't stop until after recess, convinced my dog was dead now. She was. My parents put her down at the same time and I just felt her death somehow. Not especially creepy, but still strange. My other story is more recent. I was maybe 22 and went to visit the underground galleries in Provence, a medieval town in France, with my family. We had a guide explaining the history and it was pretty interesting. At some point I was the last one in the group, lagging behind just a tiny bit. For some reasons, as we turned a corner, I felt compelled to look behind us and there was a woman there. Dressed in all white, just around the corner looking at us. She wasn't in the group, none of us looked like that, and she was just standing there. I just felt very calm and peaceful. It was a strange kind of feeling, but a very pleasant one. Since the others were quickly leaving me behind in the dark, I hurried after them and she didn't follow, so that was it. I asked the guide at the end if there were any ghost sightings in the galleries or any paranormal stories in town, and he just gave me that "Are you stupid look we Frenchies are so good at," and said no. In his defense, he gave a very interesting tour on historical facts, and the one question he got was very strange, so I don't blame him. Apparently nobody else noticed the lady in white apart from me. It really stuck with me because it's the only time I felt this calm in my life. Also the only time I saw such a well-defined shape in my strange paranormal sightings history. I work at a museum. I've seen a lot of stuff up there and it can get pretty creepy. But to date, the worst that's happened to me was a noise I heard recently. The building is huge. It's something like 30,000 square feet, it's 2 stories, but the second floor is just around the perimeter, so the building is mostly open. I had to stay late a few weeks ago. Security locks the doors and leaves at 7, so they're quick to get guests out. It was 6:45-ish p.m. and I'm running around trying to finish my tasks. Security knows I'm still in there. Anyway, I had gotten to my second floor office on the east end of the building, grabbed my stuff, and started to leave. I walked down the stairs outside of my office and started to feel sick to my stomach. The lights are all but there is still sun coming through skylights and the glass door entrance. I started to head to the west end where the employee exit is, and my stomach just begins to completely turn and I got dizzy. Then I heard what sounded like a little girl crying. Like Moaning Myrtle from HP crying. Just the saddest weep. I turned in the general direction of the noise thinking a kid was left in there and was lost, and did the typical hello? And the crying continued. So I take a few more steps east towards the sound and ask again, "Hello? Do you need help?" The crying then just stops. My thought after I didn't get a response was one of the 3 security guards was fucking with me. So I'm calling out their names and whatnot and continue to where I think the noise is. I round the corner of the stairs by my office and hear the crying once more, and when I look towards the noise, the corner of the building is just black, like completely void of light, and I felt at this point that I could just vomit any second. So I noped the hell out and quickly walked to the employee entrance. When I got there, I looked and saw all 3 security guards standing right outside. I was literally the only one in the building. When I walked out, I just told them to have a good night. They locked up and that was it. My stomach felt fine and I wasn't dizzy anymore. It was just a sickening moment. The next day I asked security about it and they confirmed I was the last one in there. My grandfather passed away when I was 7. My mother and her sisters were at the house cleaning out his shop and doing random yard work that was always his job. This big yellow swallowtail shows up and starts bothering them while they're working. For about 30 plus minutes this thing hovered around, from person to person, getting in their faces. They were convinced it was my grandfather checking in on them because he never trusted anyone else to do his work. Ever since then, whenever we see one of these yellow tiger swallowtails we all say, "Hi Pawpaw." Fast forward 20 years and I'm living off the coast of South Georgia. I was out on a catamaran with some friends one day. It was really calm, so I had my life jacket off to get some sun. As we get about a mile off the beach, the wind completely dies. This isn't too out of the ordinary, so we all just lay back to relax while we wait for it to pick up again. Out of nowhere I hear my friend say, "Is that a butterfly?" Everyone was really confused because we were so far out on the water. As it gets close enough I saw it was a big yellow swallowtail. It flew over to the boat and just bobbed around in a circle for a while. My grandfather was an avid fisherman who never learned to swim, so he was always very serious about people wearing life jackets. I said, "Sorry Pawpaw," and put my life jacket back on. It circled one more time then flew away, and the wind immediately picked back up. My guardian butterfly. I was at my friend's house one summer when his mom and stepdad were away. Weird shit happens in his house almost all the time. We know it's haunted, we know by whom, but that's something I won't talk about. Point is, freaky shit happens in that house. Anyways, we were about to go meet up with our other friends so we could all smoke and play video games in his basement. I went into his bathroom to take a piss, finished up, washed my hands, and checked my cigarette pack. One cigarette and a bus left. I closed my pack and stuck it in my pocket, while still in the bathroom. We left to go get our friends a few blocks away. When we got outside I went to go have a cigarette, looked in my pack and only saw the bust. Even though not 5 minutes prior, I knew I had a full cigarette left. Thinking I must have been bugging, I smoked the bust while we went to meet our friends. Walked back into the house and lo and behold, my cigarette was laying in the middle of the living room floor. Not crinkled, bent, broken, etc. in any way. Just there. My pants have no holes in the pockets, the pack had no holes in it, and the bathroom is a good 15 feet away from the living room. Once I looked in the mirror and for just an instant the right side of my face was distorted. My eye in particular was weirdly distended and too close to the center, and that half of my mouth was just a lopsided slash. Now, I barely scrape a 4 even with my makeup on, but I definitely don't normally look like somebody has run amok with the smudge tool on half my face. I was so startled I dropped my hair straightener on the floor, which was pretty dumb. I ended up wary of looking in mirrors for ages afterwards, particularly of accidentally glancing at my own reflection. I'm sure it was just a weird fluke of my vision where my brain was slow to process the visual information, but I don't understand why it seemed to affect just one half of my face. Edit, I should point out that the mirror itself wasn't distorted, the reflection quickly corrected itself and nothing like that ever happened again. I once saw myself walking next to myself. Again, it was an instantaneous thing, but in that instant I had time to think firstly that my twin sister was walking on my right hand side, realized that she wasn't even in the house, and then noticed that this person was wearing my clothes. I then got disoriented and had to lean against the worktop for a moment until the sensation settled down just a minute or two later. I file both of these under weird brain farts. But I once spoke to a doctor about some other weird experience. For a whole afternoon I kept randomly collapsing to one side, and she said that any strange symptom like this that seems neurological but never happens again is probably related to migraines. I do sometimes get migraines, so maybe that's why I sometimes also have these creepy brain farts. Back in the late 70s, my boyfriend was driving me home after a date around 11:30 p.m. As we approached a traffic light on a quiet street, we both noticed a huge column of light coming straight down from the sky and directly in front of us. My boyfriend quickly stopped, but as soon as he hit the brakes, the light just disappeared. At first we thought maybe it was a searchlight from a helicopter, but we had the windows down and it was perfectly quiet outside. As we continued on to my house, we spotted a white light in the sky that looked very small and far away. Suddenly, the light started to move around the sky in angular motions and super fast. We stopped the car to get a better look, and that's when the one small light became many large lights shaped like a triangle and it started to head towards us. There was absolutely no sound coming from this thing that was moving at the speed of light. We freaked out and I screamed for my boyfriend to hurry and get to my house. He floored it. We were in an 8-cylinder Grand Torino, and the thing just seemed to disappear at that point. We got to my house a minute later and both of us ran in screaming, waking everybody up. My parents tried to understand what we were talking about, but we were so shook up we could hardly describe what happened. My boyfriend asked if he could stay with us until morning because he was afraid to drive home. It wasn't until many years later that my 2 younger sisters told me that seconds before I had run into the house screaming, the bedroom they shared completely filled up with light. They were on the 2nd floor, so it couldn't have been car headlights. They just stared at each other, wondering what this light was, and then it disappeared. To this day, I believe that thing followed me home. This one was just creepy. I stayed home from work one day sick, and decided I was gonna take a shower when I woke up around noon. I let my dogs out to pee, brought them back in, and closed the door. Note I have OCD, like actual diagnosed obsessive compulsive disorder. I know I locked my door. I always lock my door. I get in the shower and had been in there maybe 10 minutes when my dogs start losing their minds barking. Now these are both small, yippy dogs. My boyfriend's is ancient and rarely barks. Mine is trained to bark, sort of a warning bark, when someone walks up to the house. This is a stranger is coming into the house bark. I jump out of the shower, throw my robe on, and walk out into the living room as I hear the screen door slam shut. My front door is wide open, and both dogs are standing as far from the door as they can, hackles raised, snapping and snarling and barking up a storm. By the time I make it to the door, all I can see is the tail end of a white F-350 hauling ass around the corner. I live in a small neighborhood, and no one that lives here drives a truck like that. Someone was trying to break into my house, and if my dogs hadn't barked I never would have known. They both got many treats and belly rubs that day. For backstory, I briefly lived in a 100+ year house in Richmond, Virginia that convinced my roommates and I ghosts, or spirits, were real. On the regular, we would hear blatant footsteps upstairs or downstairs, knowing we were all together, with the cat. We had doors locking on us and shadows on the ceilings that would disappear when there was no light source. Light switches triggered on their own, push-button switches, as well. Small ghouly things. I went up to visit my parents one weekend and came back to my roommates explaining how they attempted a seance while I was gone. From there it got so much worse. Usually in the kitchen, we would have things move around unexplainable. A mirror shattered once, but was the entire way across the room from where it originated. One time my roommate and I walked into the kitchen and found a box of floating Swiffer pads. I think the scariest thing was how my cat acted in the house. He would skirt from room to room, never wanting to be exposed for long. He's always been an indoor cat and been okay with that fact, except for when we lived in that house. He would rarely leave my bedroom, broke into the walls where I wouldn't see him for 24 hours, and even once jumped off the second floor balcony when my door was open. About once a week, around 3 to 4 a.m., I would see my cat dart into my room, belly to the ground, and hear pounding footsteps down the hallway that would stop at my door. Then when I moved out, my cat peed on all the boxes that came from that house and I had to throw out most things I accumulated over the time I spent there. It makes me sound insane, so I rarely ever bring it up, but I couldn't make this up. It's also difficult to pinpoint the creepiest experience because I was creeped out for the entire time I lived there. My friend and I decided to sleep during our lunch break. We work for Interior Consultation Company, where we worked on finished building, the facades and electrical system already installed, but there are no carpet, ceiling or AC yet. So we set our bed and turn the fan so it will blow to our way. And when we just start to lay down, we face the opposite of the fan. We feel the temperature is unbearably hot. We turn our head and see the fan already rotated 90 degrees. We stared at each other and just shrug it off. So I get up and rotated it back. Start to lay down, a little chit chat, and the fan rotated again. I asked how did it move? Which he replied no idea. Because we used construction fan, which was big and heavy, we assumed it moved due to its own vibration. We moved it back again, this time with bass so it won't move by its vibration. And guess what? It still moved. So this time, we moved it back and decided to rotate at our bed so we will stare at the fan. Nothing move it till we have fell asleep. We woke 10 minutes before the break ends. It was hot. The fan get rotated again. We ran. It was Thanksgiving, and we were visiting family at their home. It was a big house with white paneling and a very box-Y front. I remember they had some kind of special kids play area in the front yard, which included a tree fort and a small rope bridge that crossed from the tree fort to a jungle gym, over the front doorway, but about 10 feet away from the actual house. Sorry if unclear, basically tree fort on one side of the front yard, jungle gym on the other, bridge over it. The bridge was about 15 to 20 feet high. It was probably the most expensive playground I'd ever played on as a kid, lol. I was 3, my cousin was 6 to 7. Anyway, I was up there with my cousin. We were sitting on the bridge and enjoying the feeling of the wind and pretending to push his Hot Wheels across the sides of the bridge. Suddenly he tells me to get down and he lays down on the bridge. I follow suit and ask why quietly. As we're looking between the boards, a man passes under us. He was wearing a suit and a hat, and he had a dark red leather suitcase. His hat was brown, and his suit was the same color as his hat. His shoes were the same red as the suitcase. This strange man went up to the door and stopped. He didn't knock or ring the doorbell, but he stopped as though waiting to be let in. My cousin said, in as serious a tone a small child can muster, "That's the bad man. He comes here sometimes. He tried to take me away last time." My cousin held me and cried quietly and asked me to stay quiet until the man left. After a few minutes, the man checked his watch, then peeked through the windows, then walked back to his car and drove away without incident. My cousin went straight to his room and shut the door until he was forced out for dinner. I saw my housemate's doppelganger sometime last year during school holidays. My mom and housemates usually have work in the morning, so I was home alone with my dog. I was on my phone just sitting in the living room, which is right next to the laundry, and the laundry is located near my housemate's bedrooms. I was on my phone and I remember all of a sudden hearing the washing machine start. I didn't think much of this as I thought maybe one of my housemates were home doing their laundry. Then after some time, I look up from my phone to see my housemate come out of the laundry and go into his bedroom. Not a word or anything to me, and he had his back faced towards me so I didn't see his face. It spooked me out as I would have heard/seen his bedroom door open from where I was sitting for him to get to the laundry room in the first place. I shrugged it off and didn't think much of it. This happened maybe around 12 to 1 p.m. Around 3 p.m., Mum picked me up to go to the library and we didn't get back until maybe 5. Also, I don't know when exactly the washing machine stopped, I just remember realizing it wasn't on anymore sometime after he went inside his room. Then around 6 p.m., my housemate comes home. It creeped me out as I thought I had seen him earlier that day. Again, didn't think much of it as I thought he went somewhere while I was at the library and just got back. Although to make sure, I wanted to ask him as it felt like something wasn't right about the whole situation, but it was already night and I didn't want to be more scared than I was, so I waited until the next morning to ask him. When I told them, referring to my housemates and Mum, what happened, my housemate said that he was out the whole day and whoever I saw when I was alone wasn't him. I assumed who I saw was my housemate as its appearance from the back looked exactly like him and it was wearing a robe that looked like the one that my housemate wears all the time. My housemate then showed me his robe and it wasn't the one that I saw. The one I saw was a lighter shade of blue. I asked him if he had other robes and he said that he only owns one robe. Also, I forgot to mention that my dog who was laying down near me never barked or acted weird toward whatever I saw, so I genuinely thought it was my housemate. The whole situation was unexplainable and I always wonder what would have happened if I called out to whatever I saw and it turned around. I don't experience a lot of paranormal stuff, but this one creeped me out as my house never came across as haunted to me. My mum did reassure me that maybe it was a friendly ghost passing by because I didn't feel like I was in danger or anything when it happened. Till this day I never saw it again, or so I think. I have too many, but I suppose it would be when my brother and I would hear our mom calling us downstairs and we would go into the kitchen and ask what she wanted and she would make a face and say that nobody called us downstairs. This always happened. Also, at that same house there were little handprint smudges like those of grimy little kids on the part of the wall way above the stairs as they went down. Mom was always scolding us about how she was sick of us, me at 8 and my little brother at 5, jumping and putting our hands on that wall. My brother and I had to explain to her that it wasn't us and even if we wanted to we would have to get a running launch from the top of the stairs just to attempt to hit it, then we would go plummeting down the rest of the stairs and be paralyzed. Why would we do that? But she shook her head in disbelief as we were the only kids in the house and they weren't there before. My brother also spoke to someone or thing in his closet often. It's worth noting that it definitely wasn't an imaginary friend, as my family is too real to be making up friends. We don't do it. But we do acknowledge the presence of spirits. A few years back I worked in another state with a few other acquaintances. Since we liked to travel to our hometown on weekends, we usually rotated who would drive. Often we would arrive at midnight to our destination, but we had to travel 3 hours to reach it. One of these days, we were traveling as usual. I was the co-pilot. We were listening a podcast the driver liked, but it was over. Switched to the radio and started looking for a station without shitty music. I was scrolling through the stations, leaving a few seconds to listen what was playing, when the radio picked up a scream. At first I thought that we reached some kind of hardcore black metal station, and we landed right at the end of a song. But the seconds passed and the scream was still on. Okay, maybe this was static we are listening to, I thought, but then, the scream stopped for a few seconds and we could hear someone reaching for air and then only for it to begin screaming again. This pattern repeated itself for solid 5 minutes. Sometimes it would stop to breathe again, sometimes it would stop and sounds of someone rummaging trough stuff would be heard, but the screaming would always come back, and it didn't took long for us to realize that whoever was screaming was in pain. It was clear as a day that this wasn't some kind of weird artistic shit like Yoko Ono's performance. We were in trance, 5 people in the car, including me and the driver, and we were really into this. Not a peep could be heard from us. And then as soon as it started it ended. The screaming stopped and the sound of static replaced it. The first to say something was the driver, only muttering "what the fuck?" I saved the station on one of the presets and for a few minutes everybody was in shock. After that we got really curious of what we just had listened to. Nobody could come reasonable explanation, besides someone screaming at the microphone. About 12 years ago, my older sister and I were going through a big Ouija board phase. We'd play with it almost every day, but one day in particular will forever stay in my memory. We had one spirit thing in particular that would almost always speak to us, who called herself Rachel, but on this day we got in contact with a spirit who claimed their name was Goddard, and who claimed to be Rachel's 3-year-old little brother. My sister and I both felt a little uneasy about this contact, but we were naive optimists, I guess, So we continued to talk to it, but as the conversation progressed, the responses we were getting began getting darker and darker. My sister and I couldn't take it anymore once he or it started to talk about our parents dying. We both felt terrified and worried about the things that were said, so to calm down we started to watch some TV. About 5 minutes after stopping, my sister suddenly felt extremely tired, which was weird because it was about 1 in the afternoon, and she was an energetic 14-year-old, so she fell asleep on the bed behind me while I continued to watch TV. She woke up about an hour later extremely weak, and with a very high fever, but the most frightening and unexplainable thing she woke up with was one small red, almost skeletal-looking hand print on her wrist that slowly faded away as the day went on. My poor sister was terrified, and to this day, she hates even thinking about it. This was during Hurricane Irma, in Florida, about noon or 1 p.m. and where I was the storm was scheduled to be over us starting at about 3 p.m. I didn't have the money to go so I stayed. My apartment is fairly high above sea level and I'm about 45 minutes from the shoreline so I wasn't awfully worried. Most of the people in my apartment complex left though since it's mostly families, and well-to-do families at that. My roommate and I were making the best of it, filling up containers of water for if/when the power went out, it did, for almost a week, moving furniture to block the patio door, and moving valuable and fragile things away from the windows, etc. Normal hurricane prep. Storm was rolling in, clouds getting dark, wind is starting to knock smaller branches and trees off. The last thing I did was move our couch to right in front of the patio doors for extra protection. The way our complex is set up, there's a fenced-off patio for each apartment, and a sidewalk so you can walk behind all the apartments because there was a nice view there. Conversely, the fence was also small, about knee height or maybe a little taller. Just tall enough to prevent the ducks and gators from getting in, you know? Now for the spooky part that still creeps me out even almost a year later. Roommate was in kitchen filling water jugs. I walk over to patio door to check how the storm is doing. I see a large man walking on the sidewalk out back. Not necessarily unusual. Most of the families will go on strolls because you can see the lake from there. But it was less than a few hours till Irma was hitting our town, and most everyone had left and I had never seen this guy around the complex. The weirdest thing was the way he walked. He took one step forward, stood there rocking back and forth for a second and then took another step and rinse and repeat until he went behind the staircase leading to the second floor and I couldn't see him anymore. The way he walked was so oddly mechanical, like someone almost fast-forwarding a tape, it felt surreal. He never looked over or acknowledged my presence, and honestly there was something in me that was afraid of him looking over. He just kept looking dead ahead and I just remember something feeling so off that I stood there paralyzed, unable to call out to my roommate. By the time my roommate noticed me standing there with a panicked expression, he was gone. He was a pale, tall dude with a pot belly and a white tank top and white boxers. I couldn't make out his face well, which was strange to me since it was the middle of the day. I've never felt that uneasy during a daytime encounter. There was just something about him that unsettled me to my core, that I felt in my gut. He was probably some rando, but something made me feel like maybe he was something a little more paranormal. I have loads of these stories but few with witnesses. I once worked at a small bar, think long and skinny. The whole business was maybe 10 feet by 60 feet long. The bar had been a former jewelry store and even had the original shelves downstairs. The owner of the jewelry store, John, died while at work and haunted the bar 24/7. I saw him out of the corner of my eye and heard his footsteps daily. One week we had some shady customers who left some dark spirits in our establishment. Instead of hearing John walking around, things would break. I personally saw glasses slide to the end of the bar and fall off without anyone touching them. A fellow paranormal lover and I decided to sage the place. Now my friend had never seen John but knew about him. I typically opened the bar around 4 p.m. so we went at 2:30 p.m. in order to sage. We locked the doors and started saging while saying nice calming phrases, like asking only good spirits to remain. We started in a clockwise position from the front door and went all the way around the bar including downstairs. While we are downstairs, the lights actually flickered. Once we got back upstairs we placed the burning sage outside the front door and I locked the front door so that I could start getting ready to work. I was washing glasses and my friend was sitting at the bar looking at her phone when we both heard the bell on the front door ring, like someone had opened it. I then saw John walk back into the bar through the closed front door. My friend also heard the bell and saw him. She went white as a ghost and I had to make her vodka cranberry. We got rid of the bad spirits though. I work at a postal plant, and we have this large warehouse mostly used to store empty equipment. Stuff like pallets, boxes, metal containers for moving/shipping mail, etc. So there have been many times where I've been sent over to the building to work, typically to help load containers into any trucks that come, to be brought back to the main building for use. Since we don't have any actual operations in the building as it's just for storage, there are no supervisors, no cameras, no nothing. I'd often be by myself in the warehouse for hours, maybe an entire shift, simply moving and loading stuff. And it's across a large lot from the main building, meaning there's no one even remotely nearby and no means of contact, plus just getting over there was a good 5-minute walk. Anyway, stories go around work of that place being haunted all the time. Light flicker, and you'll hear faint noises of stuff moving and metal containers bumping lightly against each other fairly often. Since I'd be there pretty often by myself, I'd gotten pretty used to the noises. But even so, I'd occasionally hear particularly loud noises, or hear containers bang together suddenly. Sounds that had no right happening in an empty warehouse with only me there. So one night a driver drops off his truck and heads to his lunch. No problem, I just leisurely load his truck up while he was gone. Now the trucks were loaded on a slope, so I'd engage the lock on each container. They're pretty big, only 20 fit into a trailer, so they wouldn't roll out on their own and spin out of control, smashing into the wall or something. Partway into loading it, I turn after placing and locking a container, and I feel a faint rumble. I look to my side, and one of the containers had been unlocked, and was moving beside me at a perfect pace, which just about made me heart leap out of my chest, because it felt like someone was there with me. A moment later, it slows and turns, bumping into the wall of the truck and coming to a casual stop. The only reason this even remotely startled me was because not only was I 100% sure that I had locked the wheels on it, it would have rolled down the slope immediately, but it was moving perfectly straight down the truck next to me, at the exact same speed as I was walking. It should have gone flying down the slope out of control, picking up speed before spinning out and slamming hard into something. They never roll straight when not held. It had matched my speed on a somewhat steep slope, moving perfectly as if someone was taking it out of the truck with me. But it was the middle of the night, with the closest person being almost a few hundred yards away in another building. I know this isn't nearly as spooky as some of these other posts, and likely just seems like happenstance, but for someone who's as accustomed to how these things move and roll and work as I am, that one moment was just unusual enough to start up a fear response in my brain. Lol, sorry to anyone unimpressed with my spooky tale. Nowadays I figure, if there is a ghost in that warehouse, we're buddies by now.